All right, who has a test tomorrow? Yay. If you buy, who has a test Tuesday? Very good. How about Wednesday? Thursday? How about Friday? Oh, wow, okay, wow, that's good. If you haven't done the check-in the blue book, you know, and it's, yeah, you have to get a Chromebook. If you need the directions, I've been posting the directions on how to do it on Teams for a week. And, oh, an AP classroom, there is a 55 question multiple choice test that a lot of you have not done. You have to do it. It's tomorrow morning. It's only 55 questions, 50 minutes. Ideally, you'd like to get 33 or more correct. But the big thing is that first time you see it, there's a bunch thrown at you. If you could go back and look at them and say, oh yeah, I could have got that one. I could have got that one. That's the big thing. You're going to miss one, especially the first time. We'll do a couple more. So don't worry. We've already done some practice tests and looked at the questions. There's always going to be weird ones. You know the way they do. Standardized tests. We just have to deal with it. But, you know, I've had people all over the place. And the first one doing a lot in a row, it's always just a little bit time consuming. Also have a bunch of practice questions on AP Classroom. Just look at it, just do it at your leisure. Just want to look at them. There's also practice questions in the review book, a lot of them. And I just posted a thing with a bunch of practice tests online. And you know, like anything else, there won't be perfect examples what they'll show on the AP exam, but they'll help. And you know, the big thing is, you know, narrow it down. If you don't like the question, don't like the answer, move on to the next one. It's not that big of a deal. If there's one you don't know, really, it's fine. Move on. Just don't leave anything blank. You start getting near the end. Be efficient at the end, but get everything down. And then you have, you know, that's 50 minutes or 55 minutes. And then you have short answer questions for 40 minutes. And then DBQ, 60 minutes. Then a long essay, 35 minutes. And part of that will be a 15-minute planning period. You could write during it, but they build in 15 minutes for you to plan, do a quick outline for all that stuff. And there's a lot of time. There really is. Almost nobody has a real time crunch for the whole test. Maybe 1 or 2 units you might have an issue. But one thing I'll tell you about the 2 essays, if you're kind of worried about time, do the conclusions for both labs. It's the least important paragraph. I mean, yeah, we'd like a good conclusion, but it's a timed essay. Everyone understands that. Get your opening, 2-body or 3-body paragraphs, move on to the next one, opening, couple body paragraphs, and then you have time to go back to it. If you feel a time crunch, if you're confident, you want to just keep in the flow of one full essay, do it that way. Just do it all together. But that's a little trick that someone taught me a long time ago. And other than that, let me show you one thing really quick. So, yeah, here. This is that study guide I gave you. I have so much material, how to write essays, plan DBQ, all sorts of information, the rubrics. I have lots of information on here, a couple sample outlines. And then don't forget this thing right here. Has each unit. And each unit has a couple little bit of information. It has a bunch of terms for each unit. And the big thing about these terms, just go through, especially the bold ones, just see if you know most of them, you're fine. If there's a few bold ones you don't know, then you know you have to go back and look. Just it's a good little quick review. Also have some practice questions I put on there. Short answer question, double multiple choice. Yes, I show you the answer, but you know, figure that one out. All the way through every unit. You know, there's lots of questions, lots of practice, couple practice, little DBQ little hints. So it goes all the way through. And then, this is exciting watching it scroll, huh? Bunch of key dates. I just put that in there if you want to just look. No, you obviously don't need to know all of them, but it's not just kind of, oh yeah, I know this, I know this. And then this is the last thing, AP by topic. And this has certain topics throughout it all. These are kind of ones that they kind of say would make good essay topics. But on that last page of it, if you go back through and you go, oh, Jefferson era, if you can think of like, around 10 things about Jefferson, and if you repeat, then you go, oh, I'm ready. Just kind of goes, oh, I'm ready. I got it. Yeah. Memphis, Desi, and Mexican War. I come up with 7, 8, 9 things. I'm okay. But if you come up to one, let's say, the populist and the progressive movement, and you say, I've never heard those words before in my life, go back and just quickly feel it. That's another one I stole from somebody else. I thought that's a great way to do it. Just a nice little list. And it can be the same thing. The time frames overlap. So you can do other things with it. I kind of mentioned this in other classes, but this is a good time to do this right now. And then one more thing I put up there. I put this on Teams. I put up the outlines for that, for essays. Quick brainstorm, read the documents. If it's a DBQ, it's not DBQ, don't worry about it. You can think about your thesis and outline, context thesis, and then for the DBQ, in the topic sentence, 2 or 3 paragraphs. Summary of the topic, 2 documents, half for one of the 2. That's just a review of how to do it. One additional example, analysis related back to your thesis. That's a body paragraph. For a long essay question, it's just a glorified short ID. Topic, 2 to 3 paragraphs. Summary of the topic, make sure you explain it. 2 to 3 examples. 2 facts, things that you know. Then analysis related back to the thesis. That's it. And as long as you have a good 4-paragraph essay with 2 documents, example of outside information in each, you have a very good chance to get 5 or 6 on the subject. If you want to get that one additional point, have a good tied together essay, or they give you a couple of little things. Do an additional paragraph and add a couple, try to get all 7 documents in there. Or instead of doing 2 half, do 4. Instead of doing 2, do 4. That's for an additional point. My big thing is, I think if you get 5 or 6 on it, I think you're great shape. If you have time, you feel confident, go ahead and try to do 1 more half or do a few more documents. For the long essay, the big thing is if you get at least 2 good facts and relate it back to your thesis. It's out of 5, I think you have a very good chance. 4 or 5. Sound good? Want to see one more? The short answer question. Isn't this great? Isn't that cool? For me, that's incredibly good handling. Can you read that? That's thesis. See? I'm pretty proud of myself. Short answer question, read to the sources. Quick brainstorm list, 4 or 5 things you'll think about it. Just a few things. Because you have to come up with your own topics, remember? And they'll give you either a paragraph, a graph, 2 paragraphs, something to that effect. Or just come up with, give me an example of the Cold War. Give you an example of, the reaction to the Cold War politically, something like that. Then, short ID, 3 short IDs per question, 3 to 4 sentences each. I've been saying 3, but if you have a little bit of time, go ahead and add a little more explanation. And one more thing, just for the exam, make it 1 big paragraph. You can put like restart A, put like a B, a little parenthesis A, something. But for whatever reason, they're told when they're grading it to do it separately, they grade each separately. If you do it all in 1 paragraph, they grade them all together as 1 big paragraph, and therefore will give you more benefit. I don't know why, just this is what they tell them. And then don't forget, you pick the topic, no topic sentence. Summary, 1 or 2 sentences. Example, 1 or 2 sentences. If they ask for 2 examples, you just got to add another. They might ask for that in the short answer question. And then analysis, 1 sentence related back to the question, whatever it might be. That's the importance. Just a short ID. Excited? That's a good question. Those are good. Luck of the draw, we'll see what we get, but I'm pretty confident on those. I'll remind you again. All right, let's take out a review list. I'll answer anything on this. Anywhere on this. I'll answer anything. Oh, and then I will take a quick break. We'll do a few more minutes and I'll Any question on there, I'll answer. Yeah, one you don't know, or one you just haven't got to, that I'm just gonna get to this. Oh, what are we doing tomorrow, IT period? I'll do all the page level. I'll through it, I'll start. One, bang, bang, bang. All right, any question? Yes. Page 7? Which one is it? Oh, Hue Long, page 7. Remember, you have to do some between 7 and 10. I have to do more on page 10. I'm sorry, I might not finish. Don't get mad at me. Blame society. Huey Long, he was the governor and or senator of Louisiana. And he was one who wanted to share our wealth club, share our wealth, and to basically give everybody a little bit of money and tax the very wealthy to get it. And he looked like a potential threat to Roosevelt from the left to give more aid, but he was assassinated. He was assassinated. Another one. I gotta go kick the rock out. I'm gonna leave it out there for a few minutes. Another one. Anyone, anywhere? Yes. Yeah, Dr. Townsend. He wanted the Townsend plans, and that would be an old age pension, and that would help push Roosevelt to Social Security.
It's right next to it.
Sorry. Yeah. And like, old age pension. That's a good baby.
What's the nickname for the University of Vermont? The Catamounts. Catamount, that's another name for a cougar. Yeah. Another name for a cougar. Yeah, mountain lion, yeah, mountain cat, yeah. Catamount. Another one, anyone? Any question on page 1? Yes. Can and will. Y'all to page 8. Agreement of the big three, Stalin, Churchill, and FDR. Page 3, I think it's near.
Page 8.
What did I say?
It's
That's it, page
in
3.
the bottom from the 3rd row.
Let me get one. Let me get one out. Stalin, Churchill, and FDR. February 45, and this was to plan the post-war world. And that's the one that set up Germany into occupation zones. Also set up the UN and the Security Council. And the Soviets would enter the war against Japan 3 months after the VE Day. So UN, zone, occupation zones, into the war. And Stalin also promised free election in Eastern Europe. And many would argue this is kind of the beginning of the Cold War. And conservatives, foreign policy wise, would believe that it was like another Munich. Remember, a peace. Good one. Is there another one? And that's a good thing. You don't need every one from 7 to 10, but that could go through. I can't remember that one. Quick answer it. Another one. Anyone? Yes. On page 5, Compromise of 1877. That was after the contested election of 1876. And the decision was there were 3 states. The last 3 states that had Reconstruction sent contested electoral votes. Florida, South Carolina, Louisiana. I think if you just know 3 states, you have like contested votes. And the agreement was made to allow for Hayes, the Republican, to become president. But then Hayes agreed to end military Reconstruction. That's the biggie. Hayes agreed to end military Reconstruction. Even though it will take another 15 years to fully happen, that would lead to Redeemer governments, Jim Crow, voting rights taken away. The Republican Party would begin, basically abandoning equal rights. And the Democrats were already against equal rights. So, there's another one, yes. Lost cause, page 7?
Page 5, right above.
But I want page 7. Page 5, right above the compromise. Is that right above?
Yeah.
Lost cause would be the attitude in the South after the Civil War, basically saying that the war wasn't about slavery. It was a noble fight for states' rights. And therefore, it was almost like a northern attack, northern aggression, and therefore Reconstruction was a northern invasion. Which is not true at all. It's pure myth. There another one? Yeah. 5. Antietam? Yeah, very good, right near the top. So Antietam, that's where the Union forces, McClellan, would stop Lee's invasion of the North, and not a decisive victory, but would be enough of a victory to allow Lincoln to widen the war, to go from not just about Union, but now about freedom. It was enough of a victory. This was the bloodiest battle, the bloodiest day of the war. Bloodiest single day. 1862. And the Emancipation Proclamation freed slaves in areas controlled by the Confederacy. So it meant that the North had to win to free the slaves. But it ended slavery. Once it became freedom, slavery's over, and Britain could never enter the war. And also, over 100,000, almost all former slaves, would join the United States Army and be decisive for victory. Decisive. And I know some of you already have that down, but it's nice. Oh yeah, okay, I got that. Good review. This really is a good review. For another one. Okay. Okay. Labor unions, what's a little like one? Oh yeah, no. So labor unions, and they would really begin to join, or really begin to grow after the panic of 1873. And labor unions basically dealt with the fact that employers had no power if they tried to negotiate alone. So they wanted to negotiate as a group, and remember the term is collectively bargain, a contract for all workers. Economies of scale, they have more power. And if they don't agree to collectively bargain, that means they have to strike. And companies were violently, to this day, violently opposed to labor unions because they do raise wages and benefits. And the most successful labor union of that day would be the American Federation of Labor, the AFL. And that would be a labor union of skilled workers, not industrial, skilled workers. And they accepted the wage system, they just want better position. They have to tell. Samuel Gompers was his head. They kind of did a direct fight with, I'm the Knights of Labor. Right? Yeah, so they direct fight with the Knights of Labor. Oxygen page 6. Where's that? About halfway, right in the middle on the right side. Coxey's Army. So that was during the Panic of 1893, happened in 1894. And that was a march to Washington, D.C., led by Jacob Coxey, with the idea of having the government provide jobs for unemployed workers, doing public works, whatever needed to be done. And that would provide purchasing power to increase demand. And it actually would have passed the House. But President Cleveland, the Democratic President Cleveland, and the Senate were opposed. And Coxey would be arrested for, they made up a charge, walking on the grounds. And it disbanded the army. But the big thing about it is that it seemed to look like that the workers were having enough, and that could be a revolution. That fear of revolution, and that the two main parties didn't seem to care. Democrats and Republicans didn't seem to care what happened to unemployed workers. Coxey's army, same thing as that Pullman strike, such a big deal. Marching on a yellow brick road towards Oz. Well, that's Coxey's army, Oz. Another one. Anyway, yes. Betsy versus Ferguson, 1896, and that court case said separate but equal facilities were constitutional, so it allowed for Jim Crow laws, separate but equal. And it has never been totally overturned. Only pieces of it have been overturned. Individual cases like Brown versus the Beagle Board of Education. That's it. Yeah, top of page 7, Alice Paul. And so Alice Paul would do direct action, including protesting President Wilson at a time of war to get suffrage, direct action, following the British model for suffrage. And she would be arrested along with others and force-fed when they did a hunger strike as political prisoners. But it was their direct action during the war. And oh, don't forget, she'd be arrested for the Espionage Act. Remember the Espionage Act? We're all about that. And she would go, but it would work. It would force Democrats and Republicans, progressives, who pledged to support voting rights to finally do it. It forced it, the 19th Amendment would be passed and ratified in 1920. Then she immediately turned to an equal rights amendment. Just never. They're nothing. Where's it at? Oh, yeah, right next to Alice Paul. So W.B. Du Bois, he's an American, it should be Dubois, but we're American, so Du Bois. He was a tireless fighter for equal rights and be one of the starters of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I think if you just have NAACP, you're okay. Just the acronym should be okay. But it's a movement, if you long as you can say that they're for civil rights, you're fine. That's a lot easier than trying to write that whole thing down. And he would begin the movement that it's not enough just to have jobs or a little bit of economic rights. We must fight for equal rights. We must fight to get rid of Jim Crow laws and political equality. And so he would not get an invite to the White House like Booker T. Washington, who told everyone except at the Atlanta conference, which is right next to you might know this, Booker T. Washington, Atlanta conference, Booker T. Washington said, accept what they give. Just ask for better economic rights and don't complain about equal rights. Du Bois said, no, we have to fight for equal rights. So that would begin the stepping stones towards the things that led to, let's say, Brown versus. And his book on Reconstruction is really good. Question? Yeah. Which one? Oh, okay, near the bottom. AAA is the Agricultural Adjustment Act. And that's the Roosevelt's part of the first 100 days is bill to try to increase farm prices. But it would be found unconstitutional. And so it's an effort to try to save farm prices by getting prices up to be replaced by the second A. But the whole thing is trying to save small farms. The TVA would be one of the biggest programs, and that is the Tennessee Valley Authority. And that would build dams and hydroelectric power all the way across the Tennessee Valley Authority. And so they would provide irrigation, but the big thing is hydroelectric power for the South, which the South, most people in that area did not have electricity. So this is it's still a massive program, government operated power facility for all workers. It was one of the most beloved programs because it provided relief, reform, big deal. Yes,
Impeachment of Johnson, page one.
which one?
Impeachment of Johnson.
Oh, impeachment of Johnson, so that's 1868, and where's it at? Near the, a third of the way down?
Right side.
Yeah, so Johnson was impeached. Now, the big reason is because he refused to enforce congressional reconstruction, the military Reconstruction Act. He refused to enforce that and did everything he can to hinder it. So he clearly violated his constitutional duty by not enforcing the military, because he was opposed to Reconstruction and soon allied himself with the old Confederates, whom he used to hate. And the law that they actually originally tried to impeach him for was called the Tenure of Office Act, because he fired the secretary. But that would just be the excuse. The big thing was because he would not enforce Reconstruction. But he was impeached. That just requires a majority vote in the House. The trial was in the Senate and they were one vote short of conviction. Partially because they thought his term was so near the end, he's not going to run again, moving on. Proposition. It is so obvious. I'm not against. And that's part of the reason why it's considered one of the worst presidents. No. Yes. Which one again? The Republican woman on page 3, and that's very similar to the cult of domesticity. See it? About halfway down? Yeah. Very similar to the cult of domesticity. And it basically says women will teach their children to be good citizens in a republic. To be good citizens in a republic. Find it? What's on page 2? Did I see 3? Don't listen. Wait, never listen to me because Republican will finish. But so it's called, remember, called the domesticity, where women will be like teaching their children to have the morals and ethics. But then that's also to be good citizens. That was like the sob to Abigail Adams, who told her husband John, don't forget the women for the Declaration of Independence. And like, no, men will do this part, and the women will teach the kids to do that. So it's very close to the cult of domesticity, very much in the same thing. I only mentioned it once in class. It's one of those things where it's come up in a test, including one time an entire DPQ on it. But it was like this called the domesticity, so that's what they taught. It actually worked out fine. Yeah.
3, bargain.
Quick bargain, bottom page 3?
Bottom third.
Bottom third. The corrupt bargain. And that's where there were 4 candidates running for president, and nobody got the majority in electoral college. Jackson had more electoral votes and more popular vote. The first election with their popular vote, remember, that doesn't matter, the electoral vote. And went to the House of Representatives, and went to the House. And Henry Clay, through his support to Adams. And then Adams turned around and made Clay Secretary of State, which seemed to be like giving him the next presidency. And so that's what Jackson's defenders said. This was a corrupt bargain, a bribe. John Quincy Adams bribed Clay to become president. You can say this is the beginning of the Democratic Party. So there was only one party in 1824. It's still all Republicans. Jackson would break away. We're going to go the true Republicans and now call ourselves Democrats. Or another. Yeah. Check. Oh yeah, right near the top on page 3, everyone see it? Jefferson's philosophy. And Jefferson's philosophy was this idea that he believed in an agrarian society. based on small independent farmers who would not be beholden to anybody else. Not wage workers, because they're beholden to their employers. Independent small farmers. And Jefferson's philosophy would kind of become like the American dream for 100 years. And therefore, if it's small farmers, he believed that the best thing to help small farmers would be, another example would be laissez-faire, hands off by government, thinking that that would, because government usually just help monopolies. But that's what he thought. He also believed in being frugal. He was terrified about debt, so he wanted to make sure that government spending was low to not build up a big debt. That's because he hated the speculators who speculated on bonds. He was obsessed with the West, Lewis and Clark, Louisiana Purchase, and the last one, oh, almost forgot. Two last ones. Common man. The idea of the common man, not average, but common birth, should have a greater voice. But the last one is he was pragmatic. So he would do whatever was practical, pragmatic. And that is the most important part about his philosophy. Because he talked about, we must follow the Constitution strictly and then turn around about Louisiana. No. Whigs, page 3, about 3/4 of the way down. The Whigs. That started as the opposition party to Andrew Jackson in the democracy. So the big organizing principle of the Whigs was anti-democracy. Anti-democracy. And they were made up of the new capitalists and bankers. So kind of business. And they believed, and also the big plantation owners in the South. Because they didn't want democracy in the South either. And they were more paternalistic. They believed in Henry Clay's American system of a bank, internal improvements. Remember, internal improvements are like roads, canals, and I say bank. Oh, the biggie, it's kind of a big deal today, protecting tariffs. That's what they believed in, government aid. So they were opposed to democracy. So that's why they avoided things like slavery. They don't want to talk about it. They had Northerners and Southerners, and that's what eventually would blow it up. So it'd be the opposite of democracy, or Jackson's Democratic Republic. Okay. Marshall Report, page 3. Do you have any quote changes there? Oh, I do have one. That was, John Marshall was appointed at the last minute, those midnight judges, justices of Adams, right? John Adams, right, where he left office. So you put a bunch of Federalists in power. And John Marshall would be the Federalist Chief Justice for the next 36 years. And it would be very much a court to, it was called nationalist, increase the power of the federal government. The nationalist court. Shows the power of the Supreme Court. I mean, the Federalist Party was gone, and Marshall was still Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Federalist. So now, yeah. Bottom of page 3, the bank war. And the bank war was about Andrew Jackson and the democracies, the Democrats, fear of a national bank because it concentrated power into the hands of a few. Because of concentrated power gave them all this economic power to control the money supply in the hands of a few. So Jackson saw this as a fight against the elite. A fight against the elite. The big business. He would say like the Eastern establishment, stuff that you still hear today, it's amazing how this stuff. And he wasn't wrong, as it would turn out, but he vetoed the bank. The bank recharged him. He vetoed it. And then put government receipts in pet banks. And that would help trigger the Panic of 1837. Oh, I forgot one more thing. But he proved to be correct because Nicholas Biddle, the head of the bank, pulled currency out of the market. Pulled currency out of the market, and that helped lead to a recession, a depression. So that was, elite, that was presented as, I say the party, the Democrats were against the bank, the Whigs were for the bank. Here I'm trying to censor myself and not add too much. Yeah.
Worse. 37 of depression.
The Panic of 1837 and the Depression were one and the same. Yeah. The Depression was already begun, then the financial panic then. Just like the Depression had already begun before the crash began in 29 or 2008. Yes. That page 3? Okay, we're on page 4 now. Is this the first one on page 4? That is so exciting. So near the top of page 4, the Second Great Awakening. And that was the very evangelical, so trying to get more people to join, evangelical Protestant religious movement that was caused by the Industrial Revolution, caused by all the changes and insecurities brought by the wage system, the dramatic changes by the new technology. And so it was very much different than previous religions. It was much more emotional, individualized, your own personal salvation, a lot of heaven or hell. And they would be personified by like tent revival meetings all over the US. The best known religions of this would be the Methodists and the Baptists. Methodists and the Baptists. But there are a bunch of cults, like the Millerites who got on the roof thinking the world was going to end, things like that. That's the Second Great Awakening. I almost forgot the burnt over. The burnt over district of New York was the area of upstate New York where there was a significant amount of this Protestant. They called it burnt over because a lot of the fire and brimstone sermons. So you get all sorts of different groups, sects of Protestant religion, the Protestant faith start in that area. So everything, some religions, some sects didn't make it. Some sects would become mainstream, like for example, the Mormons of the Seventh-day Adventists came out of that. Burnt over this. And abolitionists. Oh, and there's no coincidence Seneca Falls was in the burnt over districts. Must have been quite the area. Frederick Douglass would hide, and John Brown would hide out there. It's right in the page 2, 3. Martin versus Madison, the most important Supreme Court case in history, 1803, and a base. The Supreme Court gave itself the power of judicial review. It gave itself the power of judicial review. Yeah. Okay, causes of Civil War, bottom of page 4. I'll give everyone a second to finish up the last little bit on that one. And the most, the biggest cause was the issue of slavery in the territories. Whether or not, which system will go to the territories, the Northern free labor or the Southern slavery system will go to the territories. But the most direct cause was the election of 1860. A Republican elected president just terrified the South, think they might start a Republican Party in the South. So basically an enemy within. But it's which system is that will go to the territories, because that's what the federal government supports. But two more things about the causes of the Civil War. It was those two more things are the different ideologies. It was a clash of ideologies. North began to believe in the superiority of the free labor system, providing opportunity and initiative, or to anybody with initiative, and that should be spread to the territories. Or in the South, they believed in the positive good theory of slavery, and that all three soilers were really John Browns. That's yeah. Oh, Eli Whitney, and that's page 4. Are you gonna ask that too? Good, great minds think alike. Eli Whitney, the top of page 4, and Eli Whitney he was the one who's best known for inventing the cotton gin, but also interchangeable parts for muskets. And these interchangeable parts for muskets, but the parts are made by machine tools, And the machine tools make it. He proved Adam Smith's idea of a division of labor and putting the production under one roof. And the United States, because of a shortage of labor, would take to this interchangeable part, and it will be known as, around the world, by the 1850s, interchangeable parts became known as the American system. The American system, because the US really took the idea. You can see what's coming down the road. Individual machine tools making the parts, and eventually like the assembly line, etc. Yes. Page 8, is that near the top? Almost where? Okay, so it's not even near the top at all. Right in the middle. That is the executive order using the Enemy Aliens Act, where the Enemy Aliens Act so the president can either detain or deport enemies of the state. If the city can't deport it, he just detained. And that would be the excuse for Japanese internment. And so thousands of Japanese along the West Coast would be put into concentration camps. And Korematsu was United States. The Supreme Court ruled the president has that power during the time of the war. It wouldn't just be Japanese, it would also be Italian and German, but almost all were Japanese. Significant, well. Keynesian economics are the top of page 8. Pretty big one. Keynesian economics, that is liberal economics or demand side economics. Where unlike trickle down, it should be that government must raise wages for most workers. Basically create a bigger middle class by doing things like public works or anti-monopoly or direct aid to workers like Social Security, or not in the US, but healthcare for all, or free education, not free, but taxpayer funding education, things like that. And the idea would be is that will create demand. And thus, once there's demand for goods, that will lead to production and hiring more workers and prosperity. One more thing about Keynesian economics, or two more things about Keynesian economics. So the idea of Keynesian economics, named after John Maynard Keynes, but in the Depression, use deficit spending, borrow money because of the problem of debt deflation. No one is spending money, borrow money, just spend. Worry about, in good times, pay back the debt or bring the debt down. And after World War II, almost all the non-Soviet world did that, and that would lead to the Great Depression, not just in the US, it would be worldwide, the Great Depression. And you still kind of have that in some places. But not here anymore, obviously. But most of continental Western Europe still have it. Let's see. Another question. Take a quick break or no more questions? Nuremberg trials, those were the war crime trials. And those were decided at Yalta that there would be war crime trials. And so a tribunal of the big three would be the judges, the judge from each of the big three, and then eventually big four with France. And they would do crime, they would decide crimes against humanity. But it's very important. Victors choose what a crime against humanity is. So it's going to be fascists and Japanese guards, but not Allies. Doesn't mean they weren't absolute criminals against humanity. I have to be clear about it. They were. But So the Nuremberg trials. Yes. Bretton Woods, near the bottom of page 8, is that 8? That is, it was done during 1944, Bretton Woods, but that would be the set of an international financial system based upon the United States dollar and basically Keynesian economics. So this international system, and the dollar would loosely be based upon gold. And Bretton Woods would be the system would exist till very recent. That's basically as the US as the US dollar as the reserve currency for the entire world's economy. I mean, it still is, but things have changed really fast. And today the second,
The fourth.
fourth, it's the fourth,
Fourth.
a little over a month. Whole world has been through this. So Bretton Woods is not quite what it was, but Bretton Woods was a big deal. The US would go off formally off the gold standard completely in 70. Which actually gives a lot more control over the financial. Midway, page 7? Page 8, Battle of Midway, that's the turning point in the Pacific. June 1942, with the Japanese fleet, they lost 4 carriers in this battle and they could never recover. The Japanese could never recover after losing 4 aircraft carriers. So US industrial might would assure that Japan could never outright win the war. So after Midway, the Japanese idea became kill so many Americans that the Americans will be forced to have some kind of peace agreement, some kind of terms, conditions. The emperor, remember all that? So another one. Page 1. That's the first one, page 1. So. The fur trade is what the, pretty soon the colonists would only want to trade for fur, especially beaver pelt, with the tribes right along their border. So all the English colonists, same thing with the French colonists, the fur trade, they would only want to trade for fur. And pretty soon those American Indians lost all their old skills, farming, whatever it might be. And that would be an example of economic imperialism, where this soon to be more dominant economy would begin to take over. And we would be personified by King Philip's War, where then the colony of Massachusetts in 1676, same year as Bacon's Rebellion, they decided we're just going to take that land from the tribes because they're just wasting it if they're not farming. And remember, that would be won by treachery, where they would capture and kill the leader of the Wampanoag tribe, who the English dubbed King Philip. So an example of, and that would become kind of the norm of battles. It's the bloodiest war as percentage of population. On page 3, Indian removal, Cherokee versus Georgia. Okay, the Indian Removal Act of 1830 basically said that the states can negotiate it, or the states can initiate the process to negotiate a treaty, a national treaty with the tribes, to remove them to Indian territory. So they remove from Indian territory, and they would justify by twofold. It would open up land for small farmers. That was part of Jacksonian democracy. I know. And to save the tribal members' lives. Because the United States was going to take their land and save them. Let's get them off that land. So, now, that's pretty horrible excuse for that be one of the justifications. And so that would set up Indian removal. But Cherokee versus Georgia was done by the Marshall Court. And it said that Cherokee law was sovereign on that reservation because they signed a treaty with the US. So their law was sovereign. But since it was state within a state, the Jackson administration, or it didn't have to do anything with federal government at that time. And so the state of Georgia did not enforce it. And so because of that, it basically set up the idea that the tribes had no choice. Not treaties. They knew it. And yeah, later on, they'll say that Jackson ignored it. It wasn't quite that. Does this have any, was that Trail of Tears? Do I not have Trail of Tears? And let's put the Trail of Tears on the bottom of the margin. What do you say? The Trail of Tears would be 1837, and that would be the most tragic of all the Indian removals, where the Cherokee would finally be forced out through the administration of Van Buren. And through negligence, criminal negligence and incompetence, a third would die along the way in this hell, malicious trip in winter of 37. So that would be kind of the horrific climax of the, you know,
Court packing, I think it's guilty.
which one?
Court packing.
Court packing, page 8. That was where Roosevelt, after he was reelected, or for that? Oh, right near about a quarter of the way down. Roosevelt, right after he was reelected, thought he would increase the Supreme Court up to 15 members, thinking that this would to get more liberal programs, especially Social Security and the Wagner Act, but New Deal programs passed. But it failed. It failed because many argued that Roosevelt was acting like a king, making his own judiciary. And this would be Roosevelt's first really big defeat and prove he could be beaten. And that would be kind of the nail in the coffin for the rest of for any the third New Deal, these other programs. But Social Security and the Wagner Act were found constitutional. So I guess it kind of worked partially. And at least it got the two most important laws. Yeah.
Great Awakening class on the pen is page 1.
Page 1, the Great Awakening. That was a very American religious movement. On page 1, where is it? Kind of near the bottom? Yeah, right near the bottom. 1730s, 1740s. And this had similarities with the Second Great Awakening. It was a little bit more personal, a little bit more going away against the more strict tenets of like the Lutheran or the Puritan church. And it was a partially reaction to the Enlightenment. This idea that they could find natural laws to all things. And it was also very much a movement that was egalitarian, meaning to try to get rid of the class differences in society. With the idea would be the churches that already existed really accelerated the class differences. So this first Great Awakening really did have a lot of impact on the American Revolution. The American Revolution was really egalitarian at first. The Constitution was not egalitarian. It's very class-based. Few more? Embargo Act. Page 3. Jimmy Jefferson, on Jefferson.
Under the meeting, page 3.
Page 3. That's pretty good. The Embargo Act was Jefferson and the Republicans. Reaction to the continental system, Napoleon's continental system, to embargo everybody trading with Britain, continental system, and the British blockade, the Orders in Council. It was a reaction to the Orders in Council and the continental system. And it basically said the US won't trade with anyone. We're just going to embargo everybody. Thinking that that will get Britain and France to end what they did, it turned out to be a disaster. An absolute disaster, lead to economic ruin. And Jefferson was accused of violating the rights because he would allow some supporters to trade. Anybody who criticized it wouldn't get to trade. You remember the "Oh Grab Me"? Yeah, the "Oh Grab Me," the snappy turtles. Yeah, that was Jefferson would only give license to trade to supporters. And because of this disaster, Jefferson would not run for president. And that would lead with some of the stepping stones to the war making. Want to do a few more? Is this helping?
Yes.
Into Reconstruction, page 5. Oh, there. Okay, into Reconstruction. So. The entering construction, partially it was because, lots of reasons. First off, we had the beginnings of the Redeemer governments and the Southern white governments beginning to take power. And also the panic of 1873, the depression was so bad, many in the North were basically saying, we have our own problems, let's not worry about it. It's raining pretty good. Supposed to rain between 7 and 8 feet tonight. Back down the handle, let's get on the roof. Be nice to have it. So where was I? I got distracted by rain. You should know this. Probably by now. Did I say the panic of 1873? And also, Grant's corruption really hurt. Grant's corruption hurt. And there was a lot of racism in the North and the South. And so it's like we fought a war, we're done with it. And so once the compromise of 1877 happened, the North, both, well, especially Republicans in the North, because they're the party forward, would have been. And that's where you get the Jim Crow laws. Do a few more, or you want to go? A few more? You good? A few more? Okay, yeah.
It's American War, page 4, right, one side.
So I don't think there'll be like a big question on the Mexican American War, you know. So but that's what, so I didn't leave you a lot of room. So the Mexican American War was all about the Texas border. Remember, Texas was already in the Union. The Texas border and the US wanted California. Yeah. It's in the capital. Page 4? Page 4 about halfway down.
Oh, there.
So the war would begin. So the big thing was about the Texas border and to get California. But it really was in many ways this war of conquest to get more land, partially for slave states, without a doubt. And once the United States took Mexico City, and the United States kind of engineered a war, you know, they acted like, or they lied into that Mexican forces attacked US forces. They engineered it started this war, so they triggered a war for conquest. The US won after taking Mexico City, capturing Santa Ana, and that would lead to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo with a US victory. But the big thing is like the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, that would open up the whole issue now. I mean, now it's all out there. Slavery in the territories. Slavery in the Mexican cession, that would lead to the Compromise of 1850, and so on. Few more? Page 1, the Columbian Exchange. That was the exchange of everything from the New World, or between the New World and the Old World, Western and Eastern Hemisphere. And which obviously would be triggered by Columbus's arrival. And the big things that would be exchanged, the most important one we have to know would be all those diseases from domesticated animals coming from the Old World to the New World, which would destroy the American Indian population and allow for European conquest. So all the diseases, everything from smallpox to the flu. But other things would come across, like from the New World, we have grain and livestock, domesticated animals, technology. From the New World would come things like the biggie would be maize, even bigger potatoes, tomatoes, squash, syphilis. Okay, but this big exchange. But one more thing to add to the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange, once that happened, the world became globalized overnight. And there's going to be international trade once. Overnight, it happened so fast. I mean, there were other discoveries, but it just happened so fast, globalizations. Page 1. But Champlain would give France the claim to the Mississippi River, and that would become New France, the massive French colonial holdings from Quebec all the way to Louisiana down to New Orleans on page 1. Wow.
So.
I made it, but it was. Oh, it's right there, just under that, for section 2. Third of the way down. And so France, and not that many French came. Not that many French colonists came, so they had better relations with American Indians than the British did. Because not as many French came. And so, with better relations, and also vast fur trading empires, that is why American Indians will more be likely to unify with the French against the British. But since fewer French came, that made it easier for the British to conquer after the French. Yeah. Page 6, basic diplomacy. I think it's near the middle. It's near the end, obviously. That's Teddy Roosevelt's economic imperialism. To use the power of the Navy and the Marine and the now bigger Marines. The power of the Navy and the Marines to basically extort better trade deals or U.S. economic control for like U.S. banks and U.S. corporations like United Fruit. If they ask questions about basic diplomacy, that'd be a pretty good essay question, actually. The best examples would be like the Dominican Republic, Panama, Nicaragua, the Panama Canal, Haiti. Good examples of the U.S. coming in and basically taking over the government for U.S. control. Dominican Republic, Haiti, Nicaragua, Panama. But United Fruit's the company. Yeah. Immigration. So immigration, a new immigration would come on page 4, 1830s, 1840s. And is it about halfway down? Is that right? And this would be radically different than the previous immigration. This would be more from what is now southern Germany and Ireland. And so it was culturally different. Different culture, more importantly, different religion, the majority Catholic. And there would be a significant number of Irish immigrants fleeing the hell of the potato famine. But this was worldwide. And so that's going to trigger unrest, part of the reason why so many Southern Germans came. But Ireland was the worst because of what happened at the potato famine. And because of this new immigration, that would trigger a nativist movement in the United States, anti-immigrant, partially because taking jobs, but also because of anti-Catholic bias, leading to the Know Nothing Party nativist movement. Yes. The last battle of the Revolutionary War, page 2, and I believe that's it's near the top, isn't it? Near the bottom of it. It's near the middle, I mean. Yorktown. 1781, and that's where Washington's forces surrounded Cornwallis's after the disastrous Southern strategy. Cornwallis surrendered with the help the U.S. got massive help from the French Navy. And once Cornwallis surrendered, that would be the last major battle of the American Revolutionary War. And that's when the British would realize it's not worth it, the colonies are not worth it, and directly lead to the Treaty of Paris of 1783. So Yorktown is one of those, there won't be like an essay question on it, but if there's something like the end of the Revolutionary War, something like that, something about that era, it's such a good bit of outside information. It's huge. And that's one that could be in a multiple choice without it. Something about it. Are we done? We've covered a lot, haven't we? So, what are we doing tomorrow? You want to do it tomorrow?
Page 11.
You want me just to go in order on page 11?
Yeah. Yes.
How about we just put it up there, I'll get it dark. And I will get as much as I can get done. Sound good? And it won't be that complete, but I'll give you the parts I think will be the most important.
During during the nighttime.
You're an IT person. Sound good?
Yeah.
I hope that helped. I will see you tomorrow. Yeah. Not on that day,
Okay.
but maybe ask me again, maybe the next future. Sound good?
Thank you very much.
I will need a break. Goodbye, everybody. I hope that helped. You have to leave. You have to go home. No, you want to stay.
And we know how bad I don't want it.
I hope that helped. Goodbye.
Thank you.
I hope that helped. Good job. And you guys won, I hear. Right, yeah.
Why do I still go? I would like we should.
GOV, I don't know why, that's not mine, I've just seen it a lot of times. Yeah, I think it's really fun. Because it's helped, it's,
It did.
if you want to do it, you know, just remind me, and that's all.
Okay,
Just remind me.
okay, all right, thank you. I just always didn't go because like when you throw it, so it's.
Because a lot of times gov will be like the government,
uh,
so gov, with the T, that's government. But, and I don't know why T, but, yeah. Sound good? See you tomorrow, Willie.
So for the, you said this is due by the day after the exam. Is-
I'm gonna go on the day before the exam, I'm gonna check, make sure, yeah, but I'm gonna look at that night.
Alright.
Monday.
Okay, and whole thing must be done, or just?
126
1%? And then that's, and that's 1, 2.
Yeah.
Alright,
And then those other pages, have a few, have some, you don't need everyone, the ones you're not sure about. Yeah. And it must be a few. Yeah. So you can work on that. That'll probably. That's not a bad thing to do. Yeah. See ya.